Welcome to the Footnotes Podcast, a podcast for runners looking to get a deeper commentary from their favorite running personalities. Today's episode, we have my favorite writer about running, Portland, Oregon's Peter Bromka. Peter Bromka is an accomplished writer, runner, and all-around great guy. Today's episode, we talk about the beauty of running, why runners should check their ego at the door, and why running doesn't need to be a metaphor for anything else. Without further ado, I bring you Footnotes with Peter Bromka. All right, so I have four basic questions that I'd like to ask pretty much everybody, and then a little bit more individualized question to finish, so we can get a deeper lens into who you are as well. But I think your question, I think the questions should lead people to get a deep sense of you and your relationship to running.
Wonderful, yeah. So I'm Peter Bromka. I live in Portland, Oregon, and for some context, I'm sitting in my son's closet, which is my office, and he is homesick from school, so he's playing video games out in his room. So that's some good context setting for, I actually grew up in Portland, Oregon, moved to the East Coast to run and go to college, to go to college, and maybe that tips off my my background and my priorities. I ran Division III at Tufts University. What am I now? So I've been running my whole life. And then I was working in the design world for many years. And when I was in my 20s, I didn't really compete very much. I ran in college and then I ran some marathons. And honestly, back in 2013, when the Boston bombings happened, I was running a little bit more. And I was like, I really want to run Boston Marathon next year. And that led to a whole journey that I went along with a bunch of my friends to running marathons, running more marathons, trying to get faster and faster. And along that journey, I started realizing I was having these incredible life moments that I wanted to hang on to forever. And so I started writing essays about those experiences. And then somewhere along the way, I always say at some point my Instagram, like documenting my life on Instagram became a little bit like routine. You'd be like, oh, it's Christmas again. It's my birthday. It's my wife's birthday. And then I just started posting about my running a little bit more explicitly, a little bit more in depth. And then I kind of turned my whole Instagram into documenting things I was experiencing myself as a runner, things I was seeing other people go through that I thought were meaningful. And just having been around the sport since I was a little kid, I feel like I in no way feel like I'm a master of running, but I feel like I have a good perspective on things that we see again and again, or things we're seeing for the first time, or that I'm seeing for the first time. So I always strive to write things that I describe as having honesty. Like I hold myself to a standard of like, am I being deeply truthful? And then also trying to be insightful, trying to be like, add some layer of, this is interesting to me because of X, Y, Z. And if it's interesting to me, maybe it'll be interesting to other people. So those two threads, the amateur marathoning and the writing about the experience, have really sent me on a wonderful journey that's ongoing. So I describe myself as a runner, a writer, and now a running coach. As of 2 years ago, I'm coaching other athletes, both one-on-one and hosting workshops, sort of like in particular about the Boston Marathon, but about other topics related to the marathon. So we can talk about all these things, but I am just a dad and a husband and a running coach living in Portland, Oregon.
No one's just a dad, man.
Absolutely.
You have a son. How many kids total?
I have one son. Okay. He's 9.5 years old, and
it gets better, right? Like yeah. I have a 3 and a 4-year-old, so
yeah,
in the thick of it.
I'm a big. I don't know. As an athlete, I still feel like a kid. Like you're still out there like pushing yourself, but you're having the joy of it all. And I often say to him, like, as long as we eat good food, we can also eat like junk food. And there's a whole push nowadays around like not calling it bad food and not shaming any foods. Or like there's different types of foods, and I'm like, sure, but like there's garbage, and I eat garbage, but I also eat a lot of strong foods that make you strong. So like it's a whole thing.
Yeah. Now you grew up in Portland. You went to school in Boston at Tufts. I went to Northeastern, actually.
That's awesome.
I don't know what years you were there, but maybe there was some overlap.
I was 2001 to 2005, and it was fun times. Yeah.
Okay, 03 to 09. So.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and two like running hubs in the world. Like
Whew.
you obviously spent time in, and so like Boston resonates. Like I love running around the Charles. It's just every time I go back, have to at least do one loop from Mass Ave
Yeah.
up to the Science Museum at least.
Oh, totally.
Now I have to ask, what was the best run you ever went on? And that is not a performance question, although
Yeah.
it could be. But like, is there one that stands out as like the most memorable? It elicited a certain feeling, or just the scenery was amazing. Like, whatever you want it to be.
It's a good question. I mean, best is a tough thing to answer for. I will say we ran as like early 20s college kids. We just were such fools about what we were doing. And I hope to God that information and knowledge is more widely shared. Like I was always overtrained. I just thought my big thing around my marathoning is that I always thought in college, like if I wanted it enough, I could just like squeeze it out. And that led to a lot of injury, a lot of frustration. So I had a lot of frustrating times there. I did have one time when we were running along the south side of the Charles. It was like deep winter, January or February, and the whole Charles was frozen over. And talk about stupidity of the college athlete. Two of my friends were like, all right, we're heading home. And they just banged a left and ran straight across the river with no bridge, just right over the ice. And like, as we've told this story over the years, I mean, we weren't properly dressed. Like the wind was just chilling us to the bone. And they were like, we are done. We're out of here. And everyone, for 20 years now, people have been like, do you understand the danger they probably put themselves in? They could have broken through the ice and they could have, and you're like, man, I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes your instincts are actually correct that like this ice was bulletproof. Like it had been freezing for a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in hindsight, it was not something we would advise to our children. So that's always memorable because one of my close buddies who's a dad of two and a very successful professional engineer, he was like in tears, except for his tears were like
Frozen.
like dry, freezing on his cheeks.
Yeah.
So I mean, those are the moments that you never forget, even if they're not exactly a highlight, but they're just like forged in your memory.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Now I think there's like a meme. So my wife also lived in Boston for a while. We're both from New Hampshire.
Oh, nice.
And there's like a meme that is like unidentified 20-year-old man in the Charles. Like it's just like, because it just happens so much, and that's exactly what I just thought of. Is like, oh my god, I wonder how many of those guys are banging lefts or rights onto the Charles. But I'm glad that your friend made it back okay and
he's
was
doing
fine.
well.
And well, it's definitely it's different. I didn't know. I thought it would maybe be like Nike World Headquarters, like right, like.
Yes. I mean, I've had some amazing times. Yeah, I will say part of my perspective on the sport is an appreciation for it is I like to say I am well aware of how much bigger it is than me and how many more layers. There's infinite layers of better athletes than me. I grew up in Portland. We would go to the Prefontaine Classic in Oregon every year. So I would see the high school championships, and then the best collegians would come in for the NCAA championships, and then we'd see just the world championships, gold medalists, world record holders. So you're just always aware of like there is, and I think in a good way it humbled me for a long time, but then I think it has empowered me as the years have gone by to like, hey, we're all runners. This is okay. Like there's always going to be someone better than you. There's no reason, because I think running can be so humbling for so many people that my real talk is that I think a lot of the behaviors we see out of many people comes out of insecurity, comes out of like trying to put on a shield or act a certain way about like, I'm good enough. And I'm like, hey, we're all good enough. It's okay. Like, it's okay. But I think a lot of the weird behavior is just manifestations of wishing we were like that person, wishing that they were like a little bit more distinguished or got a little more respect. And I'm like, listen, like that's a fool's errand. That's a never ending chase. And you might as well be not just perpetually satisfied. I totally admire people who push themselves and grasp for higher standards. And at the same time, knowing that never ends and it will never end. So might as well settle in and enjoy the running journey.
You can accept yourself, but also want to improve yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Freedom in knowing like that you're not going to be the best, but you can be like the best version of yourself, and not that that should shackle you, but like knowing like, okay, I'm 40, I'm not gonna win a marathon, I'm not gonna, but I can be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
And like you said, we can all be runners, and it's, as a community, what I have found is like we, for the most part, there, like I'm sure there's some toxicity within it, but like I haven't come across too much of that, which has been really nice. But everybody's really supportive, and maybe that's just the tier of runner that I am. Like the 3 hour marathoner, or starting off at 3:30 is just like everyone's like, yeah, let's like just all do the best we can.
Oh,
and
nice.
What have you found that's worked? And so that's been really nice. But I found like it like freeing, like knowing, I'm gonna swear on here, but like no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah,
gives.
absolutely.
They just care about themselves. It's like that high school thing where like you have a pimple and you think everyone's going to see it, but in reality you're just thinking about, like, everyone's just thinking about their own pimple.
Absolutely, that's a good way to put it.
So just like, I don't know. But there's lots of people who like are starting off and are really concerned about their paces or times, or like, how am I going to do? And so that leads me into this next question, which is, if someone wants to start running or has like just started, what would be just like a very general piece of advice you would have for them? Once again, doesn't need to be performance based, could just be like emotional or gear, doesn't matter. But
yeah, I mean, the things I try to, let's say, like, I'm a dad, I'm a member of my local neighborhood community through my son's school, and so other parents talk to me. Once parents realize that how much running I've done, they often talk to me about their running. And the thing I try to back my way into introducing is just like, number one, give yourself grace. Like, you are going to want to do X, Y, Z and accomplish A, B, C, D, E. But just try to not judge yourself and settle into running slower, running easier, not trying to prove on a day-to-day basis that you are enough. Because every single runner catches themselves pushing the pace a little bit, thinking like, am I fit? Am I capable? Do I still have it, or do I have it at all? Or what am I doing out here? And so I'm thinking of one, friend who lives a block over. I try to encourage her, like, hey, when you go out, don't be afraid to go a little easier, because if you take it easy today, then you might be able to come back tomorrow, and build that momentum. I gave I hosted a little running clinic for a bunch of the parents in the neighborhood, and I said, running is really the battle against two things: gravity and your own ego.
I love that.
I try to like introduce the idea that we're going to talk about some of the fundamentals of movement and what that means in relation to gravity, because running is time spent in flight. And I think the more people think about that, there's so much this conversation about foot strike and how you hit the ground, how you push off the ground. And through working with any of the number of amazing professionals I've gotten connected to around the world, I was able to better understand it is actually more about a movement away from the ground. It's less about like, fighting with the ground, and more about celebrating that flight, celebrating that stride length, and thinking about the efficiency of that. And then constantly also ego, because what I noticed with particularly new runners is they judge themselves on both sides. They are nervous about that their average pace is too slow, so they're constantly pushing slightly into that second ventilatory threshold. Like they're like can't breathe quite easily enough because they want their, and this is where the new GPS watches and Stravas and blah 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 like will just drive you insane, because I realize, particularly as a coach now, how many behaviors root back to wanting to see that average pace look a certain way on the app by the end, which I consider it a blessing that I grew up in an era where that didn't really exist. Like, you could technically measure yourself, but no one was seeing it, and it just wasn't a thing. So I could go on and on. So many behaviors that actually root back to wanting to see a certain number on the online tracker. And then conversely, new runners, beginner runners, often don't feel like they even have permission or to go faster. So, not faster like all the time, but the best runners in the world, elite runners, push themselves approximately 20% of their weekly volume. That can be divvied up into like maximum running for a few seconds at a time, sub-maximal running for 30 minutes at a time. And what I notice is that if you're newer to running, people tend to focus on just getting out there, and they don't even think they like don't want to see anyone. They don't want anyone to see them sprinting down the street, because then they're embarrassed, like, oh, I'm too slow.
Oh,
So
sure.
they don't. When I was teaching these parents, these peers of mine, like how to do drills, how to do sprints, I could tell they were like, I probably wouldn't do this. I wouldn't want to be the guy on the street, sprinting down the block, and that would be embarrassing, and I'm too slow. So I'll just skip it. And what I know from many years of running is if you never change your pace, every run starts to feel a little harder. Whereas if you push your body, your breathing system, your blood pumping system, your muscles to go harder, then the easier pace actually feels easier. It feels more fluid.
There's a physiological reason for that too.
Yes,
is your body's like responding to the input. So if you just keep giving it the input, it doesn't respond the same.
Absolutely. So both those sides of that, I've been blown away by how much beginners are judging themselves on every single side.
Sure.
And just trying to I just try to give people permission to be more playful with it, be a little bit more like their kids who don't care. And they're just willing to sprint, willing to jog.
I'd say that one piece of advice that I got that kind of, I don't want to say took care of that, but running based on perceived exertion.
Uh-huh.
And like, it's really hard to not look at your watch, and like, you can always switch it so it just shows either heart rate or training load or whatever, but just running on exertion, like, okay, this one should be a 4 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
Like, the pace is going to vary so wildly. You have kids, you don't sleep, you don't eat well, so some days that 4 out of 10 is like significantly slower. And it's just what it is. But I like how you said, it's like this constant battle, and it like, hopefully people somehow can overcome that so they can continue to actually like love or enjoy the sport, or some aspect of it. So switching gears a little bit, is there one running event or race that you haven't done that you would like to still do?
Well, I'm a big junkie for the emotion of the sport and the excitement of race day. And so honestly, that's what drew me to marathoning after I had run in college. NCAA cross country at any level, I was a Division III athlete, is very exciting. Like, the fans are screaming, the teammates are screaming, you're running as hard as you can. So then we graduate from college, I go to the marathon. I run Boston as a charity runner, then I run it as an open runner, and then I went away from it. When I got back, I've run Chicago, I've run New York City again recently. I really want to run Comrades in South Africa, which is to me like the next level. It's like a junkie like looking for like even more of an emotional hit, because from the videos and the photos I've seen, it is like a whole cultural celebration of an event continuously for something like 48 miles.
Okay,
I think.
Yeah. I'm thinking
So
of the right race here.
Yeah, it's a road ultra, but it's also like, my understanding is if you're even like ballpark 3 to 4 hours in the marathon, you are like way towards the front, because it is this enormous celebration of runners of all paces, and it's just totally bonkers from everything I've seen. So a couple of friends of mine and I started to plan out 2027. I think like they were like, because some of my friends have designs on like running Tokyo in 2026, or I think they're running London next year, Tokyo the next year, and then they're like, yeah, we're free, and so that's my tentative plan. Nice. We'll see in a couple of years how well it went.
Yeah. And now, have you run London?
I have not. I actually haven't run a marathon outside of the U.S., mostly because my son was very young when I got back into marathoning, and so it wasn't a high priority for us. And then I pretty quickly got swept up in just chasing time, like flat out, just like speed. Mm-hmm. And as London's quite quick, but it's also difficult to get into. It's expensive. So I went to the California International Marathon in December most years.
Sure.
For a couple of years there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd love to run London, Berlin, Tokyo, but it's not it's the pursuit of those and the stars and such haven't been my priority. So it's like, I hear great things though.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually was fortunate enough to run London as a charity runner this year.
Oh, amazing.
We aren't like, my wife is Katie, my wife and I are like really blessed to have our mother-in-law live in an ADU in the front of our house. And so like we fly my mom in and like they look after the kids and we're like, all right, see you later. See you in a week. And London was great. London, just the city, like forget the race.
Oh, yes.
But the city of London was so awesome.
2 stars, 2 thumbs up. 4 stars.
Definitely 6 stars for the city. The race was really wonderful too. Someone told me last year, they say, you know, if you're looking for just like a wonderful, beautiful race, to look into Dipsea up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Just over the county.
It's I hope to run that someday. It sounds like, okay, so I will say the competitor in me is like, I really want to do that race. And it sounds just like being punched in the face, like for a half hour straight.
Yes. With the hills.
It's like straight into oxygen debt. And then, it's total chaos, but all the locals love it. And it's actually like very difficult to get in because it's so oversubscribed. So there's all these rich races, like that I really want to do. It's just sort of like prioritizing, investment and time.
Sure, of course. Yeah. So this is maybe it is a running related question for you. I don't know. But what situation in your life has led to the biggest change or the most growth that you have noticed in yourself?
Oh, wow. Oh man. I mean, it's interesting how you could take things in a running direction or not.
Well, that's kind of what you do, right? Like your writing is just like reflective of the human condition.
Yeah, but I also I had an essay that I start a lot of essays that don't get finished if they're not totally clear on where they're going and what they're saying. But I had the stub of an essay with the title "Marathoning Isn't a Metaphor." Isn't not a metaphor.
Oh, okay.
Is not a metaphor, because I felt like that is both true and obviously applicable. I even posted something today about how I'm working on a book, and the difficulty of working on the book reminds me of all the same truisms about marathoning. But I think in some ways, so I used to work in the design field. I did qualitative research, interviewing people to help companies, marketing, engineering, design teams understand their customer. And while that was a wonderful career, it was at times like quite ambiguous what the goal was and how to move up, or did I want to move up, or did I want to become a manager, or what kind of work did I want to do? And I, in hindsight, have been able to see that some of my marathoning pursuit was an expression of, I don't even know which way is up in a professional setting sometimes. And my marathoning allowed me to have an outlet where I could focus. It could be both social and physical and experiential, and I could deep dive into it and build something, the sense of like improving yourself and working towards something that is not directly like financial compensation, but is meaningful. So there's a long way of like working around. I think when I used to work at Nike, and then I'm writing about, I actually got fired from Nike for like this whole situation, which was in my mind a misunderstanding, and there was a lot of understanding after the fact. But long story short, my role ended, and that forced me to quickly figure out what was next. And being an independent consultant, freelancing, parlaying it into 6 years of independent work required me to like really reflect on, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Because if you're independent, like your weaknesses are front and center quite often. And yeah, it's been a journey of understanding, okay, what does that mean for what I'm learning? What does it mean for where I should spend my time, what I should take on professionally? Because it's not linear, and it's not just like one clear outcome is the goal, It's easy for people to say like, well, set some goals and track them quarterly and, have at it. And I was like, okay, thank you for the pep talk, but it's still very confusing. Yeah, exactly.
So do you feel like running? I want to make sure I'm clear on
Yeah.
this. Like running is like very. I'm going further. I'm going faster, or I feel better while doing it. Like there's a lot more objective, like goals and ways to get there without the ambiguity. Or do you feel like,
I think it's both. Yeah, I was trying to say both things. Like one, that there was clear way to measure, like, okay, am I doing enough on any given day? Like, have I, which allows for a certain peace of mind and allows for a certain like centeredness of, it's not like, oh, maybe I should make one more phone call. I mean, I was old enough in my marathon career that I had gotten over the, like, maybe I should run one more mile. Maybe I should lift weights one more time. I understood that there's only so much you can do in a day. You should both, maximize the time you allowed and then try to be at peace and move along. And I tried to do, like, I think by the time I was in my 30s running marathons, I had a wife and a son and a career that was going pretty well. And I was like, guys, this thing running is beautiful on its own. It is core human movement. It provides value to every one of my days. It doesn't also need to be like an inroad to like small business strategy. It doesn't need to be like, so again, there are many people in the running world and they can each have their own perspective. My perspective is that I don't run in the morning to show myself that I can do hard things. Like I respect people who talk about it in that way, but I don't associate it with that. I don't think like, oh, I learned things through the goal setting process in marathoning and then I apply those to my freelance business. I'm just like, no, the two, like, running is wonderful for what it is. I don't want to get out of bed when it's cold outside my comforter. But then I know if I do, I will get outside. And I mean, I took a photo and posted on Strava this morning of the moon when, I was running and it was still dark. And I'm like, this is wonderful. And it's okay if this is being wonderful is enough, is how I feel about it. It doesn't necessarily need to be like, and therefore I'm going to rally this motivation into, more headhunting, more opportunities today. It's like, I know that it's life fulfilling for me and it sets me up to be my best self. And so that's also why I do it. I was just trying to pull apart the beauty of this thing that I've adored for many years from it needing to service all of these other things, if that makes sense.
It does. And it kind of like, I don't want to say it negates my last question for you, but it kind of like what it's doing in my head. I'm like, wow, like maybe it just shows the beauty of like literature and the written word. Like I interpret what you write through a lens of kind of like, just part of the human condition. There's beauty and pain and sorrow and heartbreak and all this stuff. But what, one little thing, like I run ridiculously early in the morning and I don't do it to like stay hard or like any of that. Like it's literally because it's the only time I have. Yeah. And so it's like, it's not this like macho thing. It's not, the like bro culture, alpha, whatever. No, it's like literally.
Yeah, here's my morning routine. You're like, all right.
Yeah, no, it's like, cause that's literally the only time I have. I get, home late from work, dinner, kids, bath, bed, like
totally
repeat. So it's nothing more than that. But okay, maybe I'll ask the question anyway. I want to know, because I think your writing is so beautiful, I want to know what you have seen or experienced, or what's the most beautiful thing you have seen or experienced because of running?
Oh, man. See, this is my favorite thing to get to, which is, I think the thing I love most is the connection between people in those moments when they're trying so hard and their loved ones are trying so hard that they push past like the pretense that we have in so much of daily life. So I think, to me, I've experienced it as a racer and also as a fan, those moments where in the events people lose themselves in cheering for each other and they just so clearly like aren't thinking about how they sound. They're not thinking about even sometimes what they say. And I've both witnessed that in the, in a stadium of, I could name you times when, US records, world records were set and the whole stadium is screaming their heads off, and I'm there just a small part of this huge mass of energy, and those are beautiful, beautiful moments. But I also think I see the same thing. I mean, what was it? I watched a video about the London Marathon this year, and this man was just documenting why he thought it was so wonderful, and he just turned the camera on, loved ones screaming for the person that they adore, just wishing them it's like I'm sort of getting choked up because there's this moment, I sense it in the voices of people when their voice kind of cracks, mm-hmm. and they're just like so willing the other person to succeed. And I think that's really what makes those days special, because it's like everything else aside, I'm saying I, meaning all these people, they would do anything to get the person that they're cheering for to feel better, to do better, to have their best day. And I think that spirit I find it continual, never-endingly inspiring and also beautiful and motivating. And so those are the things I look for on race day. Sure, there's splits and sure there's grit, but it's more that connection of just how much we want each other to succeed.
Sure. When out on course, I'm always amazed in believe me, the best time of every race is when I see my family. But one of the things that always shocks me is someone either trips and falls, someone gets a cramp, and the people around them who have these goals and have these paces that they want to hit literally stop, wildly blowing away the time they're shooting for, are sacrificing their times that they have trained for months to help someone they probably don't know.
Yeah.
And it's nuts. You're like, would I do that? And I hope I would. But when you see someone else do it, you're just like, it's
super inspiring.
This is just like, there's beauty, there's help, there's charity, all in that moment. And, even as a spectator and cheer in a crowd, and you're watching the track and field finals, even just being there for that, like you said, you're just part of this bigger thing that is running, but it's just also being a person. It's just, and I know running isn't a metaphor, but maybe sport is a metaphor, and running happens to be one of them.
Yeah. I also think it doesn't have to be a metaphor to be these glimmers of exemplifying us at our best, and as a community, as humanity, as people. And so, I think those are the moments that are that stand out, that you collect them like gems across different, over the years.
Yeah. And now your son and wife, do they go with you to CIM and the other marathons that you run?
They have, and my wife has come to CIM before, and it's interesting because as stressful it is for me, it's also stressful for them. And so it's, at times I've also traveled to races without them because it is asking a lot, both financially and then in time investment. And then the first time I went for the Olympic trials standard in 2018, there's these videos that my friend shot who was traveling around with my wife as they hopped from spot to cheer me on. And it's exceedingly stressful. There was a pack of men cruising along at 2:19 pace, and I had fallen off that pack. And there's just a video that I cherish where my wife's just swearing shit. And I come rolling down the road, and I'm still doing well, but I'm just not with those men. And it's just I appreciate that video that my friend shot, because it shows it's not just a day in the park for my wife to just be clapping along, yay. It's she's wishing me the best. She can't do anything more than scream for me, and it's a lot. So there's times when they do, and there's and then there's times when we just decide no, I'm going to go ahead. I am hoping to do more. I'm looking to do more trail races in the coming year, many of which will be more local.
Yeah.
So that'll be a good opportunity. I'm hopeful. I've actually described it as maybe an opportunity for me to use my son as a check on my ambition. Okay, I want to do well, but I also don't want to overdo it and be passed out on the side of the trail And like,
Yeah,
I want
good
to
point.
still have some composure. So in a good way, it might be like some external check on my overexertion or, swinging too hard.
Nice, nice. Now I saw it was like a 50K up there, I think.
Yeah, there's 50K and I signed up for
Oh,
100K
you
in
did?
April.
Oh,
So that's the big goal coming up. Because
wow.
yeah, just like this idea of new frontiers and trying new things and pushing myself back into that beginner's mindset of trying, learning and evolving. I've spent so many years doing sort of like 42.2K or 50K that I'm excited for something new.
Awesome. That's great. Now this is I randomly scribbled this down before we got on here, just as a question for anybody really. But do you think that you have to love running to be good at it?
Um, it's a funny thing to ask because I think my friend who I trained with a lot over the years, Patrick, he described as like the 2x2 of the four types of runners. There's the people who love to train. Then there's the people who love to race, and there are people who love both. If you don't love either, you typically don't.
Yeah, you're not running.
You typically don't stick with it for very long. Those are usually the kids who do it in high school for a little bit, and then are like, all right, I got my credit, and I can move on. I think that I certainly have friends who love to train and then will race. I have known athletes who love to race and don't particularly love to train. There's any number of pro athletes who really excel, and then the moment they are done with their pro career, they don't really ever run again, which I personally find a little sad, but that's my judgment. Like, that's not about, they can choose. Yeah, I think you don't, what I would say over many years, I've come to learn, like, it can show up in many different ways. Like, I think you can run with music or not run with music. You can run with friends or do it totally solo. There was something called like The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, which was an essay from many decades ago. And I always tell people, like, when I was in high school, I thought maybe I was too social. Like, I was a soccer player. I loved being on teams. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to succeed in this sport if it requires so much solo endeavoring. And then, you do have to run a lot of miles. And so some of those are probably going to be solo. But I've come to find, like, my best running came about because of working with others and finding that community element. And so I encourage people to not think it has to show up, like, in one way. Sure. Like, yeah.
Well, thank you, Peter. This is I don't want to take too much of your time up here.
Oh, thank you.
I would like build it as like, let's make it short, but I feel so. I really appreciate your time. This was great. Thank you for putting me at ease.
Oh yeah, of course, and thank you for reading my stuff. I mean, I know what I say is, like, I really only try to put things into the world that I wish to see in the world because I've experienced them genuinely and want to, like, bolt them down. I want to, like, codify them. They're feelings and emotions and experiences I've had that I'm like, man, I want to hang on to this, and then sharing it with others. I certainly am writing aware of an audience, but I really try to only put things out that I'm like, man, I would love to come back to this because it's a thought. Time flies. Like, I just posted recently, it's been 10 years since I put out my first running essay, and I'm forever grateful that I wrote that essay because I can hang on to that experience better as a result of running. I would always probably kind of remember running Chicago Marathon that year, but I certainly more so because I put it down. And so I encourage other people, like, make art for yourself and share it with others, but, like, don't overly make it for others or worry about what others will think,
Yeah. Your crowd will find you.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, once again, Peter, thank you for this. And in my little tutorial with Riverside, they said make sure to remind you that you have to stay on until it uploads 100%.
Oh, yes. That's fine.
I got to make sure I do that. So, Peter, this was wonderful. You'll see me liking all of your stuff on Instagram. But where can people find you on all the social channels?
Luckily, my last name, Bromka, is pretty unique. Brom as in Mary, Ka. And so that's at Bromka on Instagram, and bromka.substack.com is where I email out anytime I have a new essay. And peterbromka.com is where I've cataloged, my essays over the last number of years. And yeah, I always love hearing from people. Bromka@gmail.com is easy to remember. And that's where, I genuinely like hearing from people who, are on running journeys of their own. So thanks for being in touch.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much, Peter.
Yes.
All right. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining me today and for continued updates on all things Footnotes and Runners University. Please, I strongly ask you to consider signing up for the Runners University newsletter, where you'll receive updates about what I'm reading, writing, and creating at Runners University, as well as receive discount codes for programs and merchandise, and receive information directly to your inbox to help you become the best runner you can. As always, thanks for joining me on Footnotes, and I'll see you next time.